Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in the inmendham and such. And yes, some of it is a bit, I have seen this before. Yeah, this video reminds me of something. Yeah. Alright, well anyway, I mean there's been 891, it's a lot. It's probably more like 967, but I don't count well very much. And all of that, and what else? Yeah, I guess, So anyway, Benatar, the third video, responding to his interview, and yeah, it's just disappointing that he's just kind of pretending, okay, that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he wouldn't know what to do if the decision actually had to be made, that he's, well, I don't know, I can't decide, brains don't work very good, so I won't bother making a decision. I'll just let whatever happens, happens, and then pretend I didn't have anything to do with it, which is just a cop-out and all that kind of crap. So I just basically go through all of that in different ways of stating that there's really no choice here, right? I mean, not acting is like not going to war. I mean, you cannot go to war by saying, I don't want to fight those people. Or you cannot go to war by saying, I don't want to make the decision. Both those decisions are the same decision. They are, I'm not going to go to war and save or rescue anybody or do any of that stuff. So they're both saying no. I mean, they're both saying no. They're not saying, I don't want to make a decision. It's a decision. You can't help it. You're going to make a decision. You're going to choose this path or that path, and that's all the only two paths there are. There aren't any other path. So, I just don't see any. I don't see any way to defend the logic of saying, well, I'm not going to apply my understanding, and I'm not going to do anything. That's just not an answer. Unless you really just have no clue. If it's eeny, meeny, miny, mo, then go ahead. Ask a rock or ask a tree or ask a cloud. I mean, asking eeny, meeny, miny, mo, there's no point in asking him. So you might as well just, turn to the wall and say if the wall has a crack that's 3 inches long, then I say yes. And if it's less than 3 inches, I say no. I mean, it's just whatever. There's just very little logic in backsliding on his own argument, but that's essentially what he does, which is, as stated, disappointing. Do you have competence to act on your own, without getting a permit from the town or something? Right, so this isn't the kind of decision where you got any of those kind of options, where you can just say, okay, we'll just, we'll wait for the democracy to decide and blah, 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 blah. It's not going to happen. So you have the button, it's there, available to be hit for 60 seconds, and you have to decide, blah, blah. Not that complicated. You say, okay, under those circumstances, yeah, I have to hit it. Because not hitting it would be just basically saying, I'm not going to save the victims. I'm not going to be a hero. I'm not going to rescue anybody.
It would completely eliminate farming, fishing.
So he was asking the basic question. This is how simple the button is. It does this simple thing. Now, I would have just said it just turns everything into Mars. And the whole thing is just, the Earth is just another, a blue version, a wet version of Mars. That's it.
So,
yeah, okay, a little loud, right?
How would you feel?
So again, he's just playing this game where he doesn't understand the red button is this silent killer. It's just a perfect. Yeah, and again, the whole argument is that there's a, you can apply. You have to apply your intelligence, not some emotional reaction. So this is sort of like when, somebody you love very much is dying and you have this desperate sense of wanting to hold on to their existence and not say goodbye. But your intelligence knows there's no point in them pointlessly suffering. And so you do the right thing. You don't sit there and allow your emotional reaction to get in your way. Okay, I mean, I would, whatever the stakes would be, forever tortured if I'm wrong. okay, I would risk forever torture. Right. So if you're really confident, you got to say, yeah, you have, and you've applied reasoning. I mean, I'm just saying that people who are confident and they aren't rational, there's not much you can do about that, right? Because they're not going to be stopped by you saying, well, there's a social contract and you're not allowed to shoot the president. All of those logical arguments aren't going to mean anything to them anyway because they're crazy. And so the alternative is that you're a reasonable person. You understand that, okay, I have to be thoughtful. I have to do reasonable logic. Because Bugs Bunny says it's a bad idea, well, that I'm not going to pay attention to. So, you have to use your best judgment. But, clearly, when like if somebody asks you a question about mixing two chemicals and you know nothing about the chemistry and you have no clue what's going to happen, well, you know when you're ignorant. And you know when, oh no, I've studied the chemistry. I know this is an acid, this is a base, and this is going to happen, So, there's just a difference between when you've been thoughtful, careful, and fair in your reasoning and logic and your mixing of facts, and when there's times when you don't have a good mixture of facts. You haven't searched for the facts, you don't have the information, you can't make the decision. So declaring yourself incompetent when you do have the knowledge, when you do know how to fly the plane, right? The plane's crashing, the pilot's dead, and you do know how to fly a plane. You've played with simulators since you were a kid. No problem. Do you pretend you don't know how to fly the plane? I can be happy and not sad, and therefore I have eliminated a little bit of sad. So then these arguments about parsing and all this other stuff, and again, it's impossible to really get proportions right here, but you're really talking about if suns were frogs, okay, in the universe, and you're talking about, well, do I save one frog or a whole universe of frogs? So let's have a conversation about saving one little frog from harm, or the entire universe of frogs from harm. So the proportions are, insane in terms of there's no way to even imagine this difference in the amount, the volume that you're playing with here. So this isn't a conversation about little trivials. It's a conversation about, proportions that are just unimaginable in terms of the stakes that are riding on this. Zillions of sentient lives and all that stuff. And, if the argument is you have to squish one bug, to spare billions and trillions, there's not even, you don't even have to, even think that it has to, the logic is so obvious that it just can't be missed, unless you're trying to miss it. The next day, if I didn't take the opportunity to rescue all of those things being tortured. So basically by saying I'm not going to do it, you're basically saying that you're going to cause it. So that's, if you're not going to stop it, then if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And that is sort of it's a axiomatic sort of truth. All right, that if you have the opportunity to do something to fix it and you deliberately decide not to fix it, and then the outcome is your fault. I mean, there's no way of evading that. You're a decisive cog in the capacity of it to happen. So you go from being a coward to being a villain. So if you're too much of a coward to decide, then you're just going to be one of the villains. So again, this is just horse shit. That somehow it matters whether how many numbers you have in your mob is somehow defined. Yeah, so this whole idea of how do you gain this thing called a credible decision. So Benatar points out the fallibility of humans. Well, the fallibility of humans isn't individual humans that have failed. It's the groups that have failed. The mobs of the religious nuts, the mob here, the mob there. So obviously there's no place to get your credibility from. There's no place to, where you sign up and they're going to test your theory and prove it and decide that you're right or wrong. So there's no place to go to get credentials. pop culture isn't where you go. I mean, lowest common denominator acceptance is hardly the definition of good science. So you don't sit there and go ask the public. I mean, it's just too stupid. If you ask for their solution, they'll be putting the the tires where the steering wheel goes. I mean, they don't know how to build anything or construct anything. Seriously.
So what you're essentially saying is, let's say, I mean, for example, obviously, one thing that obviously we don't need to be God, so to speak, to know is that humans are the only species that farms animals.
All right, so these people always kind of direct arguments in places where I don't think that's the emphasis should be. Like I said, the farming is a bad thing, okay, and it happens, every year and all that kind of stuff. But compared to the millions of years of biological evolution, it's barely a drop in the ocean of misery and torture. And that's just a fact. And so I keep your eye on the big ball, which is the fact that it's not about just what humans are doing, and it's not about just what's happening to humans. It's not just about what's happening to humans and the animals they torture directly. It's about the system of nature itself, okay, that is built and constructed with this very intention of destroying everything created and destroying it without much or any compassion. I mean, there's nothing built into nature that says, oh, gee, let's not torture it too much. No, there's no safety valve. There's no relief valve. There's nothing. There's just tolerable is going to be defined by the fact that you don't have a choice. You're going to have to tolerate it. Made the decision poorly to blow up people, civilians. That was very tacky. There's so many ways they could have done it to make. Oh, so yeah, I talked a little bit about dropping the old bomb, and that it seems to me if you blew the top off of Mount Fuji, they would have got the message. I mean, there could have been some better ways to send the message to the Japanese that the game is over. And you don't want to mess with us no more. I mean, the first one should have certainly been a message, and the second one could be if you didn't get the message, then we're going to hurt you. But, to do the hurting part right from the start, that was, I think, poor judgment. 3 kids are going to get burned to death, okay, from my leaky gas tank, so I won't go to the store today. Right, so you can come up with any kind of scenario to say, oh, something's going to go wrong, it ain't going to work, we can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And then you can stop yourself from doing everything in your life. You can't say hello to your neighbor, you can't pick up a piece of garbage off the street because you're not for sure certain that wasn't an essential, life-saving, banana peel. You can't even be sure about the banana peels, right? Because there could be somebody whose life is actually saved by falling on the banana peel. Because if they didn't slip on the banana peel, they were going to walk into traffic and get killed. So yeah, because we don't have perfect knowledge, therefore we shouldn't make any decisions at all. We should just sit back and wait for the flies to lay eggs on us and eat us alive. No, we shouldn't. Decide to make certain decisions. Everybody dies, drowns. All right, and so the plan is I got to do the best I can. Right, so there's just no choice here. I mean, if you want to hand, you're on the lifeboat. You just happened for this moment to have the gun, so you can tell everybody else what the fuck we're going to do here. You can't eat all the food, and you can't, you're too fat, and you're too this, and we got to play this game fair. All right, you're almost dead. 6 months from now, your cancer is going to kill you. So, feeding you to the sharks ain't going to mean much. Somebody's going to make all these decisions, and you have the gun, and basically he's saying, well, I'll just hand it off. And who are you going to hand it off to? So I use different examples of a rock or a dead fish, or who's better to make the decision than you? Who are you going to give the gun to? One of the other selfish son of a bitches who has no qualifications sitting in the boat? There's no logic, right? There's just no logic. If no one on the boat, if they're all going, duh, they're all retards, why are you going to hand the gun to one of them? It just makes no sense.
Very, very little short of the divine qualities. But you then at least are very much approaching the God scenario.
Okay, so again, this it's very useless. We play God every single day. Every single day you make decisions, and every day those decisions will in fact have implications that you can't see. And the truth is that we all kill somebody somewhere sometime. I mean, it's just a fact that somebody dies sooner than they would have because of your existence. It's just inevitable. So some kind of tragedy is going to happen. In some other place, you'll end up rescuing somebody without trying. So, you know, but there's no way you can know all that crap.
You can't see any downside to preventing it. You don't lose anything by preventing it, and yet you're going to not prevent it.
That's stupid. Yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah, sorry. That's irrational. So now we can even call Mr. Benatar irrational. That's just fucking irrational.
So that's what it comes down to. I mean, he doesn't even believe the argument in his own book. So he writes a book, presents an argument, and basically says, but, you know, I don't know. I'm not convinced. Yeah. So what's the point? If you're not convinced, why'd you write the book?
That intrudes not only with regard to the extinction of our own species, but with regard to the extinction of some other species.
So whatever, all this species, all this extinction talk, again, it always switches right back to just looking at Mars or look at Pluto, look at Saturn, and just recognize the fact that nobody ever has cried a single solitary tear for the great tragedy that it's not littered with a bunch of crocodiles, you know, eating gazelles and shit. You know, there's no great white sharks, you know, swimming through the clouds on Jupiter, you know, eating things alive. Oh, what a tragedy. Yeah, I'm going to just weep so hard. And obviously every single second of our existence, you know, right now there's people in all kinds of terrible circumstances, all kinds of terrible things happening to them, all kinds of things to cry about. So, you know, it's just a ridiculous argument almost. I mean, it's so obviously not a tragedy to not exist. It's clearly not a tragedy.
And no one's even shed a single tear at the thought of the non-existence of the Martians.
There you go. Okay, so I did make the argument. There it is.
It's genetic means.
Yeah.
That I would be exactly. I'd be opposed to that.
So this, you know, then they get into this little, again, the cup of water arguments about whether we should bring back woolly mammoths or something, as if there makes any difference whether there's a cow or a woolly mammoth. Well, you know, there's really no difference. It doesn't matter how much fur the cow has. You know, this is a distinction without any difference. So if you're going to make billions of cows every year, or millions of cows every year, then, you know, making a 2 or 3 woolly mammoths ain't going to make any difference, really. It's a silly consideration, frankly.
Or us. Who, you know, frankly, I mean, so is there any real competition here? The DNA molecule does not have a brain.
Okay, right. So I'm just saying, if you're going to advocate and run away and all that stuff, who did you give the gun to? You gave the gun to the DNA molecule. I mean, you know, you gave your power away to a molecule. You said, oh, the molecule knows best. You know, the meteor knows best, the universe knows best. I don't know anything, right? I got a big giant brain. I've, you know, spent years in school. I've done all this studying. I've done all this analyzing, but I don't know anything. Compared to the smart, intelligent, brilliant DNA molecule, I'm an idiot. I mean, it's just too silly. Ooh.
Saving the victims. Oh, god damn. I mean, this is like going in with grenades or something and there's a kidnapping, you know. And
yeah, and they just don't care. Well, so what? We throw away the victims. It's the baby bathwater thing. I mean, he's cherishing some kind of notion of some sort of principle that means absolutely nothing. It's just bathwater by comparison. So there's only one way to be a hero, and that's to be heroic.
Cases, it's absolutely true. I'd rather if I was to become a Republican.
Okay, yeah, then I'd say I'm better off dead, so please shoot me. So look, this argument is just real. The fact is can you really do a tragedy to an individual human being if you cause them to not exist anymore? So if you just made them not wake up the next day, you just snap your fingers, they don't wake up. Have they actually been harmed? Well, it's pretty hard to make that argument that they have actually been harmed, that there's some terrible, awful, terrible, cryable tragedy that took place. And the only way you make it into a tragedy is to have a bunch of other kittens or something that, you know, and their mother's dead, and, you know, so make it into some other peripheral tragedy, okay? And then that tragedy you can always convert into, well, if those kittens survive, they're going to kill somebody else's kittens when they grow up, okay? They're going to cause all kinds of mayhem. So there's just, you know, these math equations just don't go anywhere. It clearly is a zero-sum game. All we can do is make a mess and try to clean up most of the mess we make, and there's not much else to do here. And yeah, we do have the advantage, frankly. We do have the advantage where we can try to clean up other people's messes. So we have the power to do something to stop them from raping. You know, we not only can we not be rapists, but yeah, we can actually stop rapers. You know, so let's do that. Seems the sensible thing to do. Stop the mess makers.
You're dead fish, you decide.
So I was using the analogy of the lifeboat, and somebody's got to fly the plane, and, you know, right, you know how to fly. You worked at it your whole life trying to be a good human being and all that stuff. And when it's time for somebody needs you to apply your skills, and you say, no, let the dead fish do it. I don't want the responsibility.
How are we not God? I mean, how are we by any relative?
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, we're the only gods that's available. You know, the religious folks, their God doesn't have a telephone, doesn't have an email address, doesn't have a goddamn, there's just no way to contact it, customer service. It doesn't even have an AI that'll answer the phone.
Add that up here somewhere. Not a single player game. Too expensive. Not your money.
All right, so yeah, I should have added that today. Not a single player game. Too expensive. Not your money. There. Seems to me that logic pretty much finishes the conversation. Don't think you can defeat any of those arguments with anything called reasoning. So we're done.
Idea that goes against their own belief that it is better that they had not come into existence. So you argue.
All right, so then they waste, again, this is sort of this minutiae stuff of whether we should start pretending to save each other from our own bad judgment, when, no, we don't need to do that. So that's not to scale with the urgency. So trillions of living things being tortured versus one thing being tortured. So yeah, I don't need to override the democracy or to break the social contract or to do anything because there's not enough at stake. Where in the other question, everything's it's a gigantic amount of value at stake. And so I can't not decide because of some notion that it matters whether I have majority support or not. You know, it just isn't going to be an issue. It just can't be an issue reasonably because too much is at stake.
That might differ from somebody else's, and then imposing your judgment on somebody.
Right, so imposing is always a thing you can't evade. It's not a single player game. How many times, okay, you can say this over and over again, but there's no way not to be an imposer, and the whole point is are you imposing out of your selfishness, or are you imposing out of trying to be fair and decent and right? So if you're a decent and right person, you don't spend somebody else's money to buy shit that doesn't have any value. That's just too fucking ridiculous. All right. You don't give people the gift of death. It's just, especially when you haven't died yet. You know, you don't even know what it's like. Oh, I'm just waiting. I'm going to have such a special, like, plan your death like you plan a wedding or something. Oh, it's going to have spectacular blood coming out of my eyeballs, and it's going to be so exciting. Yeah. What the fuck? And that's the gift you're giving somebody? Death? Oh, thank you. So, I mean, geez, yeah, what a great thing. I just can't wait. I mean, it's terrible when you think about it. When you actually think about what these obnoxious imposers are forcing on somebody, is all kinds of risk and horror. Again, this made me an anti-natalist from the moment I even heard of the idea of reproducing. My brain just started going through all the scenarios where my victim is a victim, where some kind of shit happens to him and I can't do a damn thing about it, or her. And, fuck. I'm done. I'm done playing creation and, imposer, because that's where you walk away and say, I don't want anything to do with being responsible for throwing something into a Damocles sword-laden environment. Why the hell would I throw something into some environment where there's risk everywhere, where they're supposed to roll these dice and I can't control what's on the dice? Why the fuck would I do that? That's an obnoxious imposition. And he's talking about violating minor fucking rights. Somewhere around here, I hit the button.
A person can escape all his logic by just saying, "You're fallible, so therefore I don't have to listen to you." Ha 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 ha.
To the wild animal stuff.
So yeah, that's what it comes down to. He's just empowering anyone to make the argument, to dispel or get rid of any kind of argument that defeats your argument. You just say, you're fallible, therefore, your argument can't be relied on. It doesn't mean anything. So what if it's logical? So what if it's it could be wrong. There's a possible scenario where Bugs Bunny actually is emperor of the earth. And you were just wrong not to think so. It's possible. Impossible. But no, it really isn't. So I have to come up with a more unrealistically realistic, silly notion of fallibility. Where there's some kind of point where you could say, yes, the Martians actually are in prison somewhere because they're not on Mars. And so they're behind the bars saying, let me out, let me get on my, let me free to be a Martian. You think that's realistically? You actually think that's a possibility, that there actually are Martian souls somewhere trapped somewhere, and say, I can't be a Martian. There's Martian sharks that are just like, oh, gee, we're just stuck here, and I can't be a shark, and it's just horrible. I don't know what they're doing. Exactly what's the shark doing in its purgatory. No, there's no chance any of that crap has anything to do with reality, so fuck it. Mars is winning. We are losing. Fact. Alright, so that's probably enough. Alright. So, I think it's all there is, actually, so that's why it's enough. I don't think I can go any further without being the end of the video.
It's, I think, necessary, and so... yeah.
Something about blah, blah, blah. This has value. So, yes, I think there is value in just waiting to be triggered by these kind of conversations and say, is this really all that complicated? How many ideas does somebody have to be... what foundational knowledge do you have to have? Not a single-player game. The other players matter as much as you. The other players include the other sentient animals because, frankly, whether you can add 2 + 2 or whether you can compose an email isn't really going to change how much you feel, okay? Your life, how sensual your life isn't dependent on how smart you are. And then it's the rest of it's just the idea of, wow, it really is very expensive, isn't it? Really, 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 really expensive. There's going to be a whole bunch of horror and torture and torment I mean, literally people chewing their appendages off. And what are we doing to earn it? You know, what's the great thing that human beings are doing over here to make the giant field of Civil War wounded worth it? I mean, what exactly are we doing over here? That's, you know, we're watching cartoons. We're watching Super Bowl ads. It's so exciting. I just can't wait to see what the Smurfs are going to do. You know, I mean, what are we doing to justify that pile of horror? Nothing. Nothing. That's the whole point. Nothing. Way too expensive, and it's not your money. You're imposing it on all these other victims. All these other sentient brains are doing the legwork, you know, while you just sit there and say, get me a Cheez-It. I mean, fuck you. Oh, it's just, oh, it's disgusting. You're such obnoxious gluttons. Eesh, oof, grotesque. Yeah, so that's enough. Now it's enough of a video. All right. So, we'll continue. Try to get a couple done this week. I did read Amanda's book with Hari Hamadi Hari, and I didn't like it at all. Yeah, it's really... so I will have to do something about that. In terms of explaining. But you know, I really cherish Amanda, but I just don't get it, you know, as an argument from as if this is more complicated than it's too expensive. It's not your money. It's not. It's no. Anyway. So yeah, I'll try to make a video about that, but you know, I'm uncomfortable because yeah, it's a pro anti-natalist book, but it's, to me, just not, you know, it's not telling the story the right way. Anyway, it's not doing. I mean, I hate to, you know, even go that far as to actually say it's not productive. You know, it's like Benatar. It's like what Benatar just did. He just degraded the value of his own book and his own argument by saying, I don't have any confidence in it. I mean, yeah. So it's about the same, you know, it's the same kind of level of disappointment, I suppose. I'm just pretty disappointed with some of these people's arguments. And so again, I'll say to this, this carnism debunked, he did a good job. He defended the reasoning very well, so I'll give him credit. I thought he was going to be part of the problem, and no, he tried to help Benatar not be a failure, but Benatar decided to be a failure in spite of his best efforts to save the day. And that's just unfortunate and sad and disappointing. All right, so now I think I'm done. Yeah, I think. Let's see, look around. Anything? Yes, no, nothing related to the video needs to be said. Okay. So till the next time and such. Oh God, I'm just so tired of this. But anyway, no offense. Yeah, no, I find you all very interesting, and I just can't wait to get here every Sunday.